3, 2, 1, and we are live on the t-shirt too, on the top, for the first ever episode of Agencyphonics. So I want to give you a little bit of an intro on what we're doing and why we're here. So give you a little story. So Agencynomics is the book that we wrote. I'm going to try and point that over to cameraman number 4. We wrote this book. Everyone seemed to like it really loads. The book editor was telling us that we were covering too many topics. We weren't focusing on one thing specifically, and so we decided that we would create a podcast series, excuse me, to maybe expand on all of the areas in the book in a bit more detail, bring some guests on, get them to maybe relate to some of the stories that happened. And that's a really good tenuous link here. I just want to say big thank you to Wirehive. They've kindly donated their studio to us to record these podcasts or vodcasts live. Today, the first episode won't be going live. We're going to be uploading this slightly later. It is our pilot show after all, and that will cover any crazy mistakes that we make, but we should be okay. I'm going to really start by introducing our first ever, the inaugural guest. So
the guinea pig
that is Suzanne Linton. And Suzanne and I have known each other for quite a long time because Suzanne used to be a competitor of mine back in the day. And so I think I'll leave my intro to you to explain who you are and what you do. So welcome to Agencyphonics.
Thank you.
And tell me a bit about you, your agency, and I guess how it all started for you as well.
Yeah, well, we're an agency called Freestyle. We go back to 1996, where we actually started film and video production. We were based up in the Midlands, spare bedroom, the standard story of the extra room somewhere with a few people beavering away.
So you started in a bedroom?
Yeah, basement.
A basement, okay.
Bedroom, yes.
Because sometimes kitchen table was a common one. I had the shed, but you actually had the basement bedroom.
The spare bedroom. Yeah, it was weird because it was a restricted height room, so we didn't really. We all the bedrooms were in the basement, and we had a couple of people used to come in and work there, but one of them was 6'4".
Okay.
And this room was only 6 foot. He couldn't stand up in it.
Right.
Everyone was walking around with the head on one side a lot. I'm 6 foot, so.
And so you're based in the Midlands, so that was
yes.
Where? Somewhere Warwickshire way. Leamington Spa.
In the middle of Leamington.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. And our main client at the time was Land Rover, and
nice client.
Within a year of us starting the agency, we'd had a small child, or a baby, and whenever a client come around to have the meeting at the kitchen table, I used to have to take the baby out for a walk and then try and judge how long the meeting was going to go on for before I can come back in, you see. So it was proper. So
that's actually another very interesting point. So you are a husband and wife team.
We are, yes.
Which there aren't that many but they're not uncommon. I come across quite a few. So we definitely later on we'll talk a bit more about how that works, what does, what doesn't, how do you because it must be quite a lot seeing each other all day and then potentially seeing each other in the evening and all weekend as well. But yeah, so you started off in this basement, and what happened next?
We had this one client, and the client just kept on growing. We kept on doing more and more work for them, and as I said before, it's film and video production, so a lot of it's on CD, putting imagery onto CD-ROMs and then DVDs, and they were asking us to do more and more technology work. Okay. So we very quickly turned off the film and video production side of it and started to work much more in the technology side. By 1999, we built them a digital asset management system. We didn't know that's what it was called at the time. It was a website that was an internal website that allowed them to access all their imagery at the time, which we still have to this day, but it's obviously in its third, fourth iteration now. But it was just one of those, didn't actually intend to do this sort of. Yeah.
And so by like 99, 2000, you were building basically websites, because I remember when I started in 1999, I think in the first 2 or 3 years I came across your website, and you had a lot of sort of multimedia production stuff you were doing as well.
Yeah.
But you were doing websites from the end of the 90s.
Yes. And
I shared this story the other day with someone, because I got married in 2000. And my father-in-law did the father of the bride talk, And he, in fact, I showed my kids the video of the wedding from 2000. My daughter's 17 now, son is 15. Gave them the video cassette, and they literally tried to find where they could plug the headphones in, because of course every device they have now, right, you plug something into it. They couldn't physically mentally understand that you plug it into something. So that was funny. But the point I'm trying to make here is that he did this talk and he introduced me and he said, my son-in-law Spencer works in the internet business. And the whole room laughed out loud, because it was in 2000, if you built websites, it was a joke, because it was like cryptocurrency. It was like a fad, right? It was something new.
A fad, yeah.
People didn't believe it was going to be big, and there was a lot of hype about it. And so really, I used to say after that, I think I might have copied you, because you had new media, I think. And I used to say, we're new media too, because that way you didn't kind of say you built websites and people didn't laugh at you. But it's amazing, isn't it, how it's only 20 years ago, 20 years, how the internet has changed the world from a room full of people laughing in a wedding, to actually being a pervasive part of everyday life for all of us. So,
and I think for me, if someone had said to me in 2000 that I'd still be working in the same company nearly 20 years later, I'd have said there's absolutely no way. My whole career had been sort of next, moving on. But I think in working in this industry, you are what I love is the continually changing nature of it. And if you say, where are you going to be in 5 years' time? Well,
it's very true.
What is technology going to be doing in 5 years' time? None of us, if we did know, we'd be very rich.
Yeah, exactly. I'd never thought of it like that, because I've always wondered, why did with my agency, I was there for 11 years, and it's I don't think I'd had a job more than like 2 or 3 years before then. But you're right, it's actually the nature of our business moves so fast that we're continually reinventing what we do all the time.
We are, yeah.
So you're around the early 2000s. Did the .com crash affect you at all?
No, at the time our client base was seemed to be protected from that. We didn't actually. You sort of sit there waiting for it to happen and preparing for it, and then it never actually does. So it's sort of, we were protected from it at that point. We were working with, apart from Land Rover, which was sort of quite sort of, you could be said to be sexy business, the car industry. But we're in the Midlands, so a lot of agencies in the Midlands tended to work in the car industry at that time. Yeah. We were also working with quite a lot of corporates. Okay. So in industries that didn't seem to be as affected by that crash around 2000. So we were protected from it at that point.
Sounds like you had real clients because you'd already had a business before that, whereas I think a lot of the people that got affected just started up and went straight into dealing with all of the money that was floating around to build .com startups. And I guess you sound like you had some real clients. Yeah. Because I met, and the reason you're here is there's two topics I want to talk to you about in particular, which is the bouncing back story and also the timesheet story. But the bouncing back story just almost sort of preempts that, I guess. I found that in 99, 2000, when I suddenly realized that the digital side of things had been quite volatile, I spoke to a lot of people or networked around that time, and they'd all said to me that they'd lost their businesses because they'd had their eggs in one basket. They'd had one big company who'd raised money, or one startup had raised money, and they worked with that one major client predominantly. And then when .com crash happened and they lost the funding, they then lost their businesses. And that's what made me, in the book we write, we say that, try and keep your largest client to 20%, and maybe even consider thinking about having, your largest sector at 25%. So you can sort of diversify your portfolio a bit to protect you from downturns. And so that kind of whole thing really for me started actually from the advice from the people who'd lost their businesses in the early 2000s. And I think it really helped a lot of people in 2008 who worked that way. But I know people who work in automotive in 2008 lost their business because of the sector. But so I'm just going to say that story now because it'll be more relevant for everyone as this progresses. But I'm guessing the next step for you though, from 2000 onwards, was quite a fast, ISDN was how we connect to the internet, and then it went to broadband, and I guess things started to really gain momentum from that moment forward.
Yeah, we were working with, we say now we're a digital agency for non-sexy businesses, but it has taken us a while to realise that's what we were doing. So you're
non-sexy businesses.
Non-sexy businesses.
So Land Rover is
we don't work with Land Rover anymore.
No, but they would not have been. They would have been sexy business,
no,
right?
But we work with Bostik and Alstom and
so there's fantastic companies that basically make loads and loads of money just kind of doing the thing behind the scenes things that no one really sees, you know?
Yeah, but it's really interesting because when you actually find out what it is they do,
Yeah.
it's a fantastic
Very innovative
story.
yeah.
So, but we were doing all this work, and we were growing very rapidly, which was fun, I suppose. When we'd started out, we'd sort of, a lot of it was around not wanting to be a typical agency. I actually refused to be called an agency for about the first 5 or 6 years.
What were you then?
What were we? We were just a company, a business trying to do
Oh,
good
just
work.
a business. Okay.
But that was because agency, I think, had a bad rep at that time.
Right.
To me, it was around you took in talent and you worked them to death, and then you spewed them out at the end, and then you might keep a couple on because they had just a bit more resilience than anyone else. But it was all hours. It was all consuming of your whole being. And I think we had a vision that we wanted to be more than that. We wanted to be better for a better work-life balance. Alan and I have both been in working in different industries, but at breakneck speed, and hardly saw each other.
Right.
And you're in your early 30s, and it's like, well, there's going to be more to life than this. If this is it, then flipping heck. So that was part of the reason for setting up the business together. Was to be able to see each other more.
And were you an agency before?
No, I was a finance director of a consultancy.
Okay.
A VAT consultancy.
So how did you know that agencies will sweat all their assets and do that?
It just
It's what you picked up, basically, or the reputation.
Yeah, the reputation of agencies in the area. I mean, Alan had worked in an agency, and but also maybe it was of the time. I don't know. In the 90s.
I remember someone walking into my business in 2003 saying, "Hey, I really like your agency," and I was like, "What the fuck is an agency?" I thought I build websites. I'm a web development company. And then I realized I had a model, and that really made a difference. Once I knew I had a model, I then could go around and meet that's how we met, really, because I then started networking with competitors, and we met through Phil Jones's Podge. And that then made me realize actually there were other people doing the business in the same way we were. So did you learn, anything from other agencies in your area, do you think, or just how to do things?
I think a lot for me it was around doing things differently better. And I think what was different from, certainly if you go from ad agencies of the 90s into digital agencies of the 2000s, I think what was different was that collaboration and the actual the willingness to share. I think if you go back to the 90s, I don't think ad agencies or marketing agencies of that time they just saw each other as competitors and out sort of kill each other. Don't share your stories, don't share best practice.
No.
And I think digital agencies seem to be a lot more receptive to that.
Yeah, I definitely. Do you remember I used to do those digital agency founders dinners, and I used to contact all the competition and say, "Hey, why don't we all get together?" And because we were quite new in a way, we didn't really have an established model. The digital agencies in the noughties, it was let's all get together, and everyone was quite open for it. And every agency has different clients and different sizes and different sectors, and all those things often make it non-competitive. Even if you are competitive, you can probably still partner together at some point, because we all have points where we can't bring on the sale because we haven't got the resource, etc. So with the business in the 2000s, did you grow quite quickly through that period, or where was the real growth at Freestyle? Because I remember looking at you one stage and you were just in international, and you'd suddenly grown really, really quickly.
Yeah, we gained a couple of clients in Paris, which was great because we ended up with a Paris address and a Paris apartment. So we worked out of the Paris apartment, which was
nice,
fab. Yeah, it was very, very nice. But I don't know. It was never intentional. It was just by referral mainly. People we met and knew, and we just grew because we did the right things, I guess. So how many people were you sort of by the beginning of the 2000s? So you sort of started 2-3 of you in the bedroom. I mapped it out. I don't know. I'm guessing we very, very quickly went to about 10-12 people by 2000, 2002, 3.
Okay. We
were probably at 40 odd, 50ish.
By what? 40, 50 by what year? Sorry.
2004, 5ish.
Okay, well that's pretty big. Okay.
Our max were about 65.
And what year was that? Do you think 65?
It was probably about It was probably around 2008, 2009.
Okay, which is when obviously the big global downturn started to happen.
Yeah,
a little
but
bit.
again,
just
that didn't.
before then.
Our downturns are delayed.
Yeah.
We seem to ride out the worst part, and then a bit later on.
Right. So you built this business, this agency. You quite pivoted a little bit into digital. It sounds like obviously that was quite new, and you started doing digital work, and you've scaled through there. Mm-hmm. When you opened in Paris, did you go there first and then find the client, or you had a client who took you there?
Over there. We had a client she'd worked in rugby.
Right.
And she was transferred into the head office in
Not
Paris.
the sport rugby, but obviously the place rugby for those who don't know it. Yeah.
And she got transferred to the head office in Paris.
Right.
And basically rang us up and said, "God, they've got to put me in charge of digital. I don't know anything about it. Can you come and help me?" So as a friend, we just went over and started to help her with digital, and that's.
And did you build a French-speaking team, and did you have
No.
Did you basically just based it yourselves over there? People from your own team.
Yeah, from our team went over there. At one point, we did have one French guy because a lot of French companies like to have a French employed person.
Of course.
But that's quite a whole rigmarole. French law, French taxes,
and lots of holiday as well.
It's just So
the main reason I wanted you here today was to talk about this story because I think there's a lot of people out there in agencies who always talk about the successes. You only ever hear the stories of success. You don't hear the true story for most of us growing our businesses is it's not a straight line, right? It's a massive roller coaster, and the journey is full of, every year there's some major crisis happening normally in an agency, but we don't always get to hear about it. But you'd grown this business really successfully. I'm sure you had a few trials along the way, but then you've even followed our golden rule. Not that you knew it at that point, but you had 3 clients at 20%. Is that right? And then what happened?
2 of them stopped working.
Right.
With us. Well, no, that's not true. They just stopped.
Yeah.
They didn't stop working with us. They just. We had a period where they had. We had a period where a couple of clients were taken over.
Okay.
Alstom was bought by GE.
Yeah.
And Siemens, split into 2 and bought by 2 separate companies, both of which already had their digital platforms sorted out and didn't actually at that point need any additional help. We had, and that happened quite often because some of these big corporates end up being in mergers and acquisitions. You have no idea it's coming, obviously.
Yeah. Surprise.
But also we had a period where the clients were asking us for lots of proposals. We were spending a lot of time sort of scoping out things and putting together plans. And you ended up holding on to staff because you kept thinking, well, when they do want this to happen. So over a period of about 3 or 4 months over a summer, it was this sort of they're gonna if they hit the button on at least even half of the things they've asked us to look at, we're going to be in trouble if we don't keep everybody around. So you're just waiting for that next.
And I'm sure if you'd lost people, then you might have been panicking that they've been hard to re-recruit because you're not necessarily you're in the Midlands, but you're not necessarily in the middle of central London, right, where maybe it'd be easier to find resource again quickly. So you probably held on even longer for that reason because you probably had if you were that size in your area, you must have had most of the decent talent to a certain degree. Because
I think we did.
Yeah. So because that's one of the challenges is finding experienced people when you're in sort of more regional areas. So you kept hanging on, and then eventually those deals didn't come in, and
you just gotta stop.
So was the lesson with hindsight that you should have done something quicker or seen it, or do you just genuinely think it's just one of those things that you?
I think some of it was uncontrollable from our point of view. Some of it was we should have acted. We should just if you stop in your gut, you say what should we do? You know what you should do. And I think you just. Over optimism makes you carry on and just go, no, it'll be all right. So in hindsight, probably would have cut earlier. Yeah. But you never want to do. We're a very tight team. Don't want to do that at all.
Okay.
And we, I think also I probably would have given more training to the account teams to be able to better identify what was actually happening. So if you're able to
almost
either
they had
escalate
too much false hope, like they thought it was going to come in, but maybe it wasn't.
So are they're close to the client,
Too optimistic.
but is the client is their client too junior to actually know what's happening at board level, or are they getting the right messages? Are we as a business embedded enough at different levels to be able to give you that information that just goes on? And to be able to go to your client and say, look, this is the situation. I need to know what you're planning over the next 2 or 3 months so that I can still be here to service you in the future. Then we didn't have that ability at that time. I think now we're much better at that, but then I think in hindsight.
So you hit this wall.
Mm-hmm.
There's a good part of the story to come. Don't worry. So you hit the wall.
We were on holiday.
And I mean, how you were on? Yeah, that's right. You were on holiday. I remember this story.
Yeah, we were on holiday and spent most of that holiday talking to the bank, sort of pulling together, trying to improve our cash flow, talking to friends, family. Banking in all our ISAs and any cash we get hold of, basically to put it back all into the business to get us through the period where you then have to make the cuts and you have to. So
and that must have been really hard.
It was horrible.
Yeah. Because you said 65 people, and then
at that point we were probably around 45, 50.
Okay, 45, 50, and then but you had been higher at one point though. Is that right?
65 was our max.
Your peak, okay, and then so now you're there, and then what did you end up once you had to cut back?
Down. We went down to I think it was about 30, but then and then what then happens is other people then leave. Yeah. Of
course. Yeah. So knock-on effect.
Yeah. So we probably lost another 7 or 8 after that. Wow. So I thought we were down to 23.
Gosh, so that must have been really difficult. And what I experience normally when I see that happen to businesses is that the owners then start sort of change the way they are fundamentally and what they're doing, and they kind of sometimes start to wobble themselves and start to have to rethink how they're doing things. And so did that happen? Do you think you started to kind of make wrong decisions, or do you think it just helped you now take stock?
I think it absolutely. I think what had happened to us over the years was we had, I think we had lost our faith in our own ability to judge what we should be doing,
right?
Or drifted away from our original values.
Okay.
And some of that was through being not having the confidence that we knew what to do.
Right.
And I think in hindsight now, we did know what to do. We just took the wrong advice. And we put in a whole lot of hierarchy. We ended up with a company that I don't think either Alan and I enjoyed being at.
Right.
We didn't feel connected to it as we should have done.
And is that because you kept winning new business and you just kept adding people on all the time?
I don't think we protected our culture enough.
Right.
I think we had a good culture, so we still have a great. The people who've been at Freestyle are very, very connected with each other still. There are WhatsApp groups of ex-freestylers, and one of my plans over the next 12 months is to have an alumni. To start bringing people together. You're always a freestyler.
Yeah.
But I think we'd lost some of the. I don't know, some of the magic that made it all work.
So going back gave you a chance then to start again and to refine that magic and rebuild from the core of people that were left. And
when we were on the holiday,
rediscover.
I think I'd sent to her and said, I'm never doing this again. This is not acceptable.
Yeah.
Don't ever want to be in this position ever again. So your choices are you either stop doing it or you make it into something that it is what you want it to be.
Yeah.
So we came back into the business, I think much more energized about connecting much more truly with everybody, getting really under the skin of what it was we were doing. Same with the clients, getting really to understand much better where we should be pointing ourselves in the future, how we should be positioning ourselves. And that I think what we found was we went back to our values and we really looked at our values again. It didn't change massively, but we did look at, we sort of went back and said, go back, rewind 15, 18 years and go, why are we here? What are we here for? And we, as a result of that, ended up with a much stronger team. And that team was able to, I was in a meeting this morning and Guy, our tech director, said, we have more, we could stay with this team as we are now and do twice as much work, and in absolute faith that we've got the ability to be really, really productive, because we have a communication way, a way of trusting each other, and the way we are now structured means that that team just works together. There's a magic in there, and it's great to.
And how do you protect that? Because how do you stop that ever, creeping away from you again? How do you make sure that you revisit that regularly now to make sure that things aren't suddenly running away, or you're?
Okay, so part of that to me is part of that to me is looking at yourself and looking at what is it about you that means that. What I don't want to do is make the same mistakes again.
Of course.
I want to go into this and bring all the good parts forward and make sure I don't repeat. I want to look at my own weaknesses and address them.
Yep.
So I would say I'm not great at communication. I just assume I don't need lots of recognition from everyone else. So I don't recognise that other people might need a lot more than I need. There's all sorts of bits and pieces. So communication, the better our communication with the whole team, the more better understanding they have, the better they communicate with each other. And it's a rolling. It's like a snowball, isn't it?
Yeah.
It gets better and better and better the more you hold it together. So I guess, what was the question?
How do you make sure that because when we make mistakes in business and we have to learn lessons. But it's a bit like I always laugh about 5% mortgages. Like 8 years ago or whatever, 10 years ago, we're never going to do those again. It was why the whole financial economy happened, and then 10 years later, there's 5% mortgages on the market and reverse premiums or whatever. So, but it's almost like how do you? I was more curious to know. Do you have more checking mechanisms to make sure? But it sounds to me like actually it's more pervasive now. Like your business has changed so that couldn't happen again. Like you couldn't lose control of the values. You've got ways to make sure that you aren't going to just recruit people in who don't fit the culture, or you're building in a much more steady way as well. I'm imagining that you'll be much more sensitive to any large scale clients coming in that could cause this effect.
I think I think certainly in the past we had you had a new client, you recruited desperately to try and put a bum on a seat in order to fulfill the work, project. Now it's what I love is the fact that the team are as protective of our culture as I am. So they will sort of say, I'm working like stink to make this project happen. We could really do with another one of me, or a junior, someone else to help me or whatever, but I don't want anybody. I will wait until that right person walks through the door. So we have quite, a rigorous recruitment process of finding the right people. Until that right person walks through the door, we will not recruit anyone.
Do you know, I talked to a new agency only yesterday who had recruited like 4 or 5 people, and they'd all gone very quickly. And I was making that same point, the Amazon 7 interviews to recruit somebody, and the whole saying hire slow, fire fast type thing, but just it's
so true.
Not the amount of times I used to offer people a job on the first interview, and a lot of times they wouldn't take it because they were almost expecting the interview process to be a bit of a game as well. And you learn some things, like you do have to check skills, check values, check your culture, but also like get them to spend time sometimes with the team themselves to make sure that they will fit in. And I think that does take a few steps, and you've got to make sure they really want to work for you, and it's the job they want to do rather than.
When we recruit, we always make sure if there's when there's a first interview, there's 2 people, and there's a second interview, one of those people is in the second interview to identify whether that person's personality has changed.
Oh right, that's
because
good. I like that. Good tip.
You see people come in, and we've had in the past where you've had a first interview. Oh, you should come in for a second interview and meet completely different people. They walk out that second interview and go, what were you thinking? He was an idiot. You go, well, you thought he was really good actually. What happened? And if you're not in there, they then look at you and go, well, you can't recruit, can you? Because that was a terrible person to put forward to second interview. Whereas having that continuity means you can look at someone and go, God, that's different. I'm so glad we did second interview, because we would never have identified that at first interview.
So before we come on to the changes that you made and once that happened, you just reminded me of something, because you mentioned the alumni for freestylers, and I always, when I first met you, I said I thought your name Freestyler was because you named it after people doing, free running or like freestyle football or something like that, and I couldn't like click. When you told me, I was like, even though I knew you were a swimmer, I didn't realise, of course, freestyle is a swimming style. So to tell us where did the name originally come from, but also tell us what you do when you're not running an agency.
Well, freestyle is the fastest swimming stroke. Actually, it's not a stroke. It's whatever stroke you choose.
Okay.
So you have front crawl, backstroke, breaststroke, and butterfly, and freestyle is any of those. And it's anything, you can do anything as long as you don't pull in the lane rope and as long as you don't sort of push off the bottom of the pool. So there's no rules.
Okay.
So it's the fastest way, the most efficient way of swimming. And
telling me you're a rule breaker because no rules.
Yeah, I don't like rules.
Okay.
So I suppose it just represented to Alan and I, who we met in a swimming pool.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Bit's weird, isn't it? That was where we come from. So
and you're quite a good swimmer, aren't you?
For my age.
Aren't you a world champion or something?
No,
or you have a world record. Do you have something?
We've got so as a team, as a masters team, you accumulate a number of ages. And last year we won. We did a time that was a British record and a European record. So that was four of us, four women. Thank you. And we all got out the pool, and I turned to them and said, "You do know the world record's only 16 seconds faster than that, don't you? This is over. This is a 10.5-minute race. So we're going for the world record at the end of this month."
Are you?
Yes.
Wow.
So
does like swimming? I'm not a great swimmer. Like I swim, but I'm not. I'm a bit of a social swimmer. But don't you guys have to get up like really early in the morning? Do you have to get in the pool at like 5 o'clock? Because everyone I know that swims is like it's a super early start.
When I was a kid,
yeah,
that's what we
did. Is that because I see my kids, friends do that?
But it's actually to do with when is the pool available. So in this country we have very few swimming pools per capita. You go to Australia and they're all over the place. So having a access
because the weather's better, it's more outdoor pools.
Well, that helps. Yeah. Having access to a pool. Normally, with it's sort of like there's lessons, school lessons for kids from 9 till, and if you 9 till probably just in the mornings, and then they have sort of aqua aerobics, whatever, straight after work.
Because there's nothing worse when you're socially swimming and there's some really good swimmer next to you, like bashing past you, intimidating you. So they make you go in early to stop that happening.
No, it's about trying to find a spare lane where you can, where you don't have to
meet
dodge
people like me,
the social swimmers.
Great. So do the values of the company match the description you said at the beginning? Like, would you say your values, did they come from swimming? Is there sport have a big correlation, I guess, to what I'm saying, to the team? A lot of people do use analogies from sport and business. Do you?
Yeah, I suppose.
Is there a correlation?
I think so. It's probably what drives my thinking in terms of my experience of being in a team, and I think a lot of people assume that swimming is a very solitary sport. I mean, it is when you're training, it's solitary, but actually, as soon as you stop swimming, you're part of a group of swimmers in the pool, and you have that respect of all the other people in the pool as to whether you're dodging a swim or whether you're actually putting the effort in, and that's quite a strong bonding mechanism, I guess. And then when you go to meets, you tend to be representing a team. Even if you're swimming by yourself, you're representing that team, and it's quite a strong camaraderie. And the to me, it was always the coach. I was very lucky to have a fantastic coach who recommended when I was in my 20s that if I was ever in Birmingham, I should swim. I should go and swim with this other coach that he really recommended, who was Alan's coach. And that's how we met. I was recommended to go and swim at this other pool. And to me, it was about those two gentlemen who just really inspired you to do the best you could be, to be the best you, and always be looking for the next. So, to me, it's in business. It's about how you build a great team, how you build that camaraderie, where you will put out for each other,
Yeah.
And be there for each other, and you've got each other's backs.
Yeah.
And celebrate each other. So when someone does a great time, or when someone does a great piece of coding, there's a real celebration of, well done. It's yes, respect. But at the same time, every time you do a swim, you're trying to beat your own time. So did you watch the athletics?
Not last 3 days. I literally have had back-to-back days, and I got in and I heard that we'd won. I think it was the heptathlon gold, and that's all I've heard. So I probably have a bit of a catch up this weekend.
Both Dean Asher Smith.
I love that you have more time to watch this stuff than me.
Should have been swimming.
You're running an agency, sorry.
and Katarina Johnson-Thompson, both when they won and they're going to be interviewed afterwards, both said, "Yeah, but I could do better."
Yeah.
And I think that's they've both done PBs. They've both broken the British records.
Yeah. And
they're both coming out going, yeah.
They train for more, I guess.
I could do better. Yeah.
Right.
So you're always, to me, one of our values is better than yesterday. So you're always continually improving. You're looking at what you did, how you could do it better, whether it's more efficiently, whether it's more creatively, whether it's a better process, whether it's being better, kinder to each other. It's how you keep improving every single time, never resting on your laurels.
Yeah, it's great. I'm reading a book at the moment called Stealing Fire. I should know it really because I'm reading it, and it was recommended to me in the last week, and it talks a lot about, I'm going to use the word collective consciousness, but it talks a lot about teams and the way that they become mentally on sync with each other, and they start to perform better. So Navy SEALs perform better in their units because they get to spend so much time together. It's almost a much more almost intuitive connection that forms between them. And I think actually, as I've been reading this book or listening to it, that I can see the correlation with really high perform. And it talks about high performing teams. It talks about Google as well. And when you have a high performing team, actually there's almost more than a physical connection between them, the mental connection between you, or the fact you understand. It's funny, Pete and I, whenever we message each other, in fact, Pete, just let you know, Pete will be on somebody's podcast with me. He's just very busy doing some deals at the moment for helping some agencies. But Pete and I will often message each other the same message in the same words at the same time, and it's so funny how almost in tune we are with each other, and how together we are, the sum of the two of us is much greater, right? Yeah. So I think if you get a team really performing well together, that's a really fantastic place to be. So I'm going to talk about Alan in a bit, actually, about the working together, but tell me, how did you rebuild? I mean, I'm really interested to know, because I think every agency out there, who has either had this problem or is going to at one point, I think, have a problem where, something big happens, a crisis of some sort happens. I reckon I had about 2 or 3 of these over the 11 years for me, where, I was staring at difficult quarters, running out of cash, having to restructure the business because what I was selling was no longer matching maybe the services of the people I had in the business, because our world, especially in the digital side of things, tends to sort of change quite quickly. Mm-hmm. What were the things that you did to then move forward and rebuild? What were the sort of key things you put in place, would you think?
I think the main part was going back to those values again, rejigging and coming back to the culture. Then it was about communicating to the team where we were going. Yeah.
Okay. So a new vision almost.
Yeah. How we were going to come out of this.
Okay.
And
amazing.
And I think it's funny as an agency owner, as any business owner, is that when someone of your team comes and hands their notice in, that they don't see that as them making you redundant. But to me, it's exactly the same. It's like you're rejecting me.
Yeah.
And that actually, when you make someone in your team redundant, you don't want to have to do it. But everyone sees you as betraying the team. And I think it's hard to come to then to get that magic back and get that trust back of the team. That this isn't something you're just going to do willy nilly. You're just going to crack on and whatever, ride roughshod over everyone's lives. And prove that you're there for them, and you're doing the best you can do. And I suppose part of that is where it's that joint accountability and collective knowledge of that each person's doing the best job that they can do. That no one's sort of that we haven't got enough business in, so are the sales guys or the account directors not actually doing anything?
Yeah, but you said that you had this hierarchical structure before, and now you've removed that, right? Yeah. So how did that? Where did that come from? And I guess that's where the empowerment you're talking about, and accountability, stems from.
It was taking. Okay, so some of my thoughts on this is.
I threw a lot at you then. Sorry.
No, you're right. Is that to me, managing human beings is a skill, and a beautiful skill in its own right. Human beings are complicated in animals. We will bugger up pretty much everything given half a chance.
Yeah.
And you know that that we need a framework to work in, but also we need autonomy at the same time, and it's getting that balance of those two things together.
Yeah.
And we've been taught over the years that if you to progress in your career, you need to be a line manager, you need to be made a manager of the rest of the people in your team. I need a team. I need and I sort of want to break down some of those assumptions, that there are some great people who do some fantastic jobs, and I want them to just be better and better at doing those fantastic jobs. And managing a group of people that they don't really like or don't get is not going to help them be better in life or more happier. And actually, you need. To me,
it's funny, isn't it? We don't have managers when we run our lives. Like when you think back to the younger version of me working for other people, I'd pay my mortgage or pay my rent. I'd get in my car. I wouldn't ask permission to go to lunch. Like we're very, very good at self-organizing and looking after ourselves. But when we go into the work environment, it feels like it needs to be this sort of permission and this sort of, I'm not going to do anything unless I'm told to do it. And you're right. It is an inherent thing, because actually, when I read,
it's probably taught at school, isn't it?
Well, I think I'm in. We talk about Frederick Laloux's Reinventing Organizations. Have you read that book?
Yes.
And if you look, he talks about it goes all the way back to when people were first, basically in the slave trade and the way people were, and then it moved into religious organizational structures, and then military structures, and actually the modern working day practice, 20th century working practices, came from really army structures evolving into kind of these hierarchies where maybe important people in jobs got their jobs because of their personal success or their families or their achievements or whatever, and actually it just kind of everyone went with it for 100 years. And I think we're now in this period, the last 20 years, where people are actually asking why. And then people will say things like, well, you can't scale these new ideas. But I think people are slowly proving that you can. But so what did you do? So you said
we've taken out a lot of the hierarchies. We sort of there's an element of I hate senior and junior. I think and that's endemic within the agency structure. Junior everything, then to senior everything. It's like so it's about. And also for me, job titles are always, I don't like being put in a box. I'm an accountant, and I remember going to parties and people say, what do you do? And you say, I'm an accountant. Oh, well, let me introduce you to the one other accountant in the room. You go, no, please don't. And just that assumption of what it is, that the personality you have as a result
I do
of
that
the
with
job
Pete.
title.
I do that with Pete all the time. Every time I meet an accountant, Pete's an accountant, quick, go and talk to him.
You must have something to say to each other.
Talk spreadsheets. Come on. Sorry, that was
no. So having job titles that are appropriate to the position, to the meeting you're in, you can have a junior account manager in a meeting where they're actually the lead in that room, and actually they need to be the account director for that client. That's what their role is.
So do you have no job titles?
We have job titles because because people want them. And you have, I want something to put on my social media channels as to what it is I am. Yeah. And so as a social structure, we still need those somehow.
I think now with the workforces, the current sort of, people working in, let's say, I'm going to use a term of sort of maybe a modern workforce, being under 35-year-old worker. I think people in those age categories actually do, from what I've seen, do want almost more job titles, like more recognition of progression, like seniors. I've seen more introduction of titles than junior, middle, and like senior account managers. Like it used to go account manager, account director, but senior account manager is definitely, so I think there's almost seems to be a demand for more of that, because people are seeking recognition for their development externally. as well. So that's one of the things that...
I agree. And what we try, so we've brought somebody into our business who's responsible for our people, their development, and the culture, sort of to maintain the culture and make sure it doesn't...
So how many are you back up to now?
30.
30, okay, right.
So, and I think it's probably early to bring that role in, but it feels the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Because I think we were quite good at...
I think it's about the right time to bring it in. Yeah,
okay.
I think kind of 2.5 million, 30, 35 people is the right size. Because it's, I'm always going, mindset first, then culture, then strategy. But culture, your business, only asset in your business is your people, right? So really having that investment in people is really key.
Well, her role is really around making sure that every person in the business has a development plan,
right?
But that is personal to them. So it's not about it's not a piece of paper.
Yeah, and it's hard for owners to manage that right by themselves because they've got enough other things, hats to wear. So that side, I think that makes sense. But so you don't have any managers as such.
We have mentors. We have
mentors, okay.
So
people that support people rather than people that manage people almost.
Support people because they are expert in that particular discipline. So a manager, I think as traditional manager would be someone who could tell you where you're doing the right thing in your job and the wrong thing in your job, as well as whether you can have a holiday and whether you're where have you been this last 3 weeks. A coach and a mentor to me is someone who will promote that person through their expertise,
right,
and help them develop in that way. We then have Emma comes in to sort of push that person to not just be to be an external force, I guess, to promote that person, not just in that way, and not just in that field, but maybe look wider. To me, I think digital at the moment, I think some of the challenges we've had for several years now is for people, how much people need to understand across function. So you can be expert in what you do, but if you don't understand, if you might be, back-end dev, but if you don't understand the requirements of the front-end dev, and you don't understand the requirements of the platform you're working with, you don't understand how the creative is approaching this. Where it all comes together is when everyone has a really good appreciation of the other person's expertise. So you need that sort of like bleeding of the edges of knowledge and experience. Yeah,
I think, we're in this knowledge economy. We're in the knowledge economy in agencies. Knowledge is everything, and because we talked at the very beginning, we said about this sort of the speed of change of technology brings to our businesses. It probably brings it to most businesses now. This exponential growth that, whether it just be the technology or actually even the business changes for our clients and us, actually, in the old days of agencies, it was quite expensive to train staff, and I think actually, in fact, just generally in business, I remember when I was, running Blue Halo, the training was like sort of somewhere between £500 and £1,500 a day. Whereas now, because we have, Linda on LinkedIn and Udemy, we've got these tools where you can pay £50 a month and you get access to thousands of training courses. It's more accessible, but we almost need more of that now because we need to invest more in our people because change is happening so much faster. I mean, it used to be, I think, someone said to me once, IBM, this is like an old saying, IBM would reinvent its business every 18 months because technology is evolving. But I feel like all of us now, in a way, have to reinvent our business services like every year. And so we need our teams to embrace learning, and we need to support them, like you're suggesting, by creating learning development plans, but not just about what they do, but also knowing around the periphery of what they do. And this, I use this phrase a lot, this now, next and future. It's almost like you've got to almost know the now, next and future. You've got to know about cryptocurrency today because it may not be pervasive in your life right now, but it's going to happen and it's going to impact a lot of what you do. And almost like, do you learn about it when it's too late, or do you need to start, do your team members start learning about these things now so when it matures, they're ready for it? And so
I think part of that is how you communicate that with the team. So you might have a whole team going, I'm not really interested in that. But they're going, well, actually, what we're doing is protecting your career, because if you understand these things, you're going to be much more valuable to this agency, but to anyone else as well. So it's part of your development to stretch beyond that little channel you've just got yourself on at the moment. And I think also in the past, I've seen this happen quite often, where you have a line manager and you have a nice little team, and that manager doesn't want their team to progress because it messes up the dynamics of their the little setup they've got going. It's all going very well.
Was a threat to their job.
Yeah, I'm meeting my goals and my I'm getting my bonus. So actually don't get any better at this, because I just want you to keep doing this for the next 2 or 3 years while I save up for that or do this. So I think that stagnation. I'm trying to take that out.
And my observation of when I see your business, I do see a highly empowered team, one that does truly own what it does. When I look at you outside in, and I think that's something that a lot of people listening probably are trying to get to, a point where their teams are taking much more ownership. And I think that, would you agree that probably removing hierarchies helps that, because there isn't then someone controlling the ability for them to take ownership, right?
Yeah, I think,
and to be empowered.
Yeah, and nothing is ever perfect. No structure and no system is the nirvana, because if it was, we'd all be doing it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, everything has its flaws.
Yeah, you're always looking at how you can do things better, and how and going, oh God, didn't mean that to happen as well. So, and so I think it's a combination of that autonomy within the team, the right team, where you've got mutual respect for each other's roles and each other's expertise. So no one's sort of like dabbling, going, oh, they're a bit crap at that, so I'll help them. I'll stick my oar in and just see what's happening, and then people go, what are you doing? And so you've got that mutual respect. You've got a no blame culture, so you're able to learn, you're able to fail, you're able to do that without people going, oh, it's your fault.
And I think people misunderstand that. I think people misunderstand the having a culture where it's okay to fail. Like, I know people probably read about this stuff and talk about it, but it's trying to make sure that people who work in your teams know it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay if things go wrong, as long as you learn from it and you don't repeat it time and time again, because that would be incompetent, right?
But you want people to make mistakes,
because they're taking risks. Because how do they learn? Yeah. But I think it's weird how people, and I think sometimes people are intolerant of people that make mistakes, whereas I'm always celebrating them. But it doesn't really, funny, when we started to do this podcast together, I was getting some help from the team at Wirehive, and I was going, look, it's going to go wrong. I'm happy, and we're going to learn lessons. Every episode, we'll learn a lesson and we'll fix it, and and it will move forward and get better. And I think they're looking at me like I'm a bit weird. Like, no, it's got to be perfect. It's got to work first time but it won't. I just know that's how life goes. And I think I used to stand in front of my team Blue Halo and say the same thing to them. I used to say, look, you take risks. You don't get fired for making the same mistake for making a mistake. Don't make it twice, please. Don't make it 3 times, because then we've got to have a conversation. But and that way, I think everyone was just get on and did things. And I think we could all learn more from that. But I'm convinced that you're not having managers in now has really helped that with you, because I just think I see that, like, for example, you use Office Vibe, don't you?
Yeah.
And do you know what your score? What's it been peaking at? Do you say in its highs?
65 was its highest.
Yeah.
It's currently about 54. 54,
and then what's the rating? Do you know what the rating is as well? I'm putting you on the spot now, aren't I? 8.1. So 8.1 is a pretty high score. And I spoke to someone the other day, and he said to me that his NPS, and I haven't seen the score, so it's like this could be what we call Agencynomics, where the agency owner exaggerates. But he was telling me it was 90. And which is really high, right? Mm-hmm. Really, really high. And then he said, but we don't have any managers. We only have coaches. And I thought, that's for me, if there's one pattern. So when we wrote the book, I think like I touched on flat structures, but it was early days. I touched on, and I want to talk more about people with sort of more distributed workforces and teams that aren't in house, because I think there's a lot of modern things that have changed even in the last 12 months since writing the book. But I do think that the pattern I'm seeing where the hierarchies are in, and using Office Vibe, and lots of plugs here for software companies, but I'm not sponsored by any of them, don't worry. Not yet anyway. But even if it was, it'd go to Agencynomics charity, But it is interesting, the hierarchical teams do have lower scores. And I think that, we know that it comes down to probably not, doesn't mean that they don't work, and they can work. I mean, Good to Great was built on that, and a lot of people, swear by books and philosophies like Get a Grip, and but that encourage the sort of hierarchy, roles and responsibilities. But not roles and responsibilities, but having hierarchical structures. But I think for me, there's definitely correlation now between happier workforces removing managers, creating more coaches and supporters, and trusting people to own their role and responsibility and work in collaboration with other people for greater roles and responsibilities.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? I mean, it's
absolutely.
Well, you've obviously done both, so you must have seen the difference in how it worked before with the hierarchy and how it is now.
Yeah, and I think you end up with, having a guiding framework with, you obviously, you come back to the Frederick Laloux book, and it's about people having responsibility for a particular role, and one person's particular role might be the operations of the whole business, and someone else will be the strategy of the business, and someone else's will be the people, but they are sort of their jobs in their own right, rather than as sitting at the top of a pyramid. And I think it's then how you communicate. So that communication piece is key. And we're not perfect. We don't get it right. We're still,
That's what I like about you're honest about it. We still make mistakes. There's still things that could be optimized and moving. It's not. I don't think that there's no right or wrong on either way.
There are some days
advantages.
But there are some days you walk in and you go, God, this is just so good, and everyone's on song, and it's just the whole place just buzzing, and it feels great, and you think, this is it. But you can't capture it in a bottle, because the next day someone's had an argument with their other half, and they come in a bad mood, and it just shifts that feeling in the office, and it's just an ever moving.
Yeah, as you said at the beginning, we're human beings and we're complicated, and agencies are full of them, so it's always going to be tough. So lastly, just I wanted to touch on this, running a business as a couple, and I mean,
we haven't done timesheets.
Oh, hang on, no, the most. What? No timesheets? That's the highlight of the day. So one of the other things you didn't do then was you took timesheets out, right?
We had measured everything. We had something called bad value. We measured our recorded value hours, RVH. We had 3-letter abbreviations for everything. We had, there are massive gains you can have. The information you can get from that information can be fab. And I'm an accountant, and I'm saying that the reality is that how much do you actually use that information? How often do you use that information, and what actions do you take as a result of that? And I think the reality was, when we came to it, every week it was like, we tried so many different ways of getting people to fill in the timesheets. Having been in an accountancy practice when I was in my 20s, I'd filled in those timesheets, and I consider myself to be quite a truthful, honest person. And I know I hadn't always been honest with the way I filled it in, because something happened, and I know.
Really?
Should I have said that?
People didn't fill my timesheets out, honestly.
And you just know, in the people you trust the most would be people going, I worked on it this evening, but I haven't put it on my timesheets because I did it out of hours. You go, no, that's not the point. That's not what we're trying to.
We all spend hours trying to chase up with people to complete.
We're trying to understand how long this actually takes, so we can estimate better. Oh well, in that case, I didn't put yesterday's on either, because I knew we'd go over budget, so I didn't, and I put it on another job because I knew I would be all right. And it just seemed to take out creativity. It seemed we were running on the wrong metrics, the wrong things for the business, and in the end, it was like, let's just. But stop.
I'm guessing at the time you did that, though, things must have been working pretty well for you to have the confidence to remove it. Because for me, obviously, when you first told me that, I was like, that's never going to work.
Pete said, what am I going to do? He almost said, I don't think I can work with you.
I know. And I mean, we were both kind of really, a bit cynical, let's say, because, we go, every time we go, there's always, and by the way, I don't think we were ever necessarily paralysis by analysis with them. We just had the data. We would look back once a quarter and say, what went right, what went wrong. We'd pick one thing that went wrong. We would look at the timesheets, we would look at the client, the situation, how it worked, and we would try and learn from that experience and go, okay, the process here didn't work. We overserviced with too many hours. How do we do that? And from all of that, we would learn one lesson, and we probably only learn 4 a year, once each quarter. But it was probably the Pareto's law: 80% of the problems would get fixed moving forwards. but I think there was a time at the end where our process was so good, like we were just delivering everything on time and perfect. I think we could have, now you've told me this, right, and I've had time to reflect, because I don't know everything. If I'd removed them at that point, I think the fact that we had milestones to deliver work, we knew what the time schedule should have been to deliver it. We were delivering everything on time, on budget, and actually we could have removed them. But I think it did take us quite a few years to get to that place of nirvana, let's call it, where actually everything did seem to work, because we had a lot of problems in our process. It kept breaking as we scaled. And I guess what you're not saying is that if something did break, you'd probably try and fix it without time. But if you had to really do it, you could do it as an individual process rather than having run all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I will say is you are really, really efficient as a business. Like, I've seen, some of the records over the past 12 months, and you've hit, the holy grail of 100,000 turnover, per employee at points, which is, really strong, especially for an outside of London agency. So it clearly is working, the approach you're taking. Do you think that you'll ever put them in to solve if it broke again or not? Or do you think you'd always just not use them to solve the problem?
I think with project management going towards agile and lean and that agile mentality, taking that agile mentality into how we run the whole business means that you just that iteration is key to. I think if I stopped and any team in the business and just say, look, are we over-servicing this client?
Yeah.
Are we going to meet the deadlines? All the questions you'd ask of timesheets, you get an honest, on the hoof answer that was true. That was an accurate reflection of what was happening at the time, and you could actually act on it there and then. You didn't have to go and wait a week to get the figures out and then do something with it. You're actually doing it as you're going along, so that agile iterating. Yeah,
you're not waiting for a massive car crash 6 months down the line to find out. You're finding in much more regular increments where things are out of sync.
I was just saying to the guys yesterday that you look at the failure of businesses, and you look at Carillion going down, you look at Thomas Cook going down, and then immediately they'll come back and what on earth were the accountants doing signing off the audit reports? And you're going, well, they're not actually, they're looking at figures for something else, and that's what I think you can be in danger of doing with timesheets if you want to run your business wholly on that. And for me, it was around humans, adults. I want to treat everybody in the agency as an adult.
And your team hated timesheets, right? I mean, that was definitely a cultural thing. I remember you saying that they
did
weren't.
Hate them.
Maybe hate's a strong word, but
But even the guy who complained about them the most and really didn't like them, when we said we were taking them out, he went, "Well, how on earth are you going to run the business then?"
Yeah.
It was like
bring me back my manager. So would you recommend other people do this?
If you
were me, would you tell me to tell all my clients to
I think it's horses for courses. I think each person has to work. There are very successful agencies out there that have the structures and the frameworks and and timesheets in place, and a very happy crew delivering filling in those timesheets. I don't think. I think it's what's right for us and our culture and our.
I'm not having a go at it. I'm really genuinely quite. I think it's probably been one of the biggest. I've read a book recently. It said, by the time you're 35 years old, 95% of who you are is already predetermined, and your experiences you have, sometimes they cement in. It's quite hard to undo sometimes your beliefs, right? And I know this, right, because a lot of what I do in my job is trying to course correct people's thinking, whether I think they got behaviour or habit things that maybe aren't the more fixed mindset than growth mindset. But I think probably the most fundamental thing you've helped me change my perspective on now. Someone says to me, should I do timesheets? And I don't go, yes. I go, well, actually, no. I think there are two approaches, and I'm much more, honest about that now. It's different on the pitching side.
I was at a dinner about
another episode. Sorry.
I was at a dinner about talking about culture, all sorts of different businesses, and there was one guy there who'd worked in consulting, legal firms, and they're very much run by hierarchy of a partner. And he said he was working in this quite a toxic environment where the bar was continually being raised. The guy who ran it was never happy. It was more. The people were there till midnight most nights. It was just, that was the way it was. But it was also the most successful. It was the most profitable part of the whole of this. I can't remember which business it was, but a big company. It was the most successful part. Most people fought to be in that team because you were earning your stripes. You were getting great pay. But having that on your CV as oh God, you were in his team. Wow, okay. And he was just saying, you couldn't say, I'm going to do this for the next 30 years because you burnt out. But you knew what you were letting yourself in for. You signed up for it, and it was a ride. And though, it's a different culture. It's a culture that drives that level of commitment, that level of self-punishment, masochism, for a benefit whether it's some form of delayed gratification. But it's a different thing is right for different cultures.
I'm also just thinking, I wonder how much time you save a month because you don't do your team, because they don't have to do timesheet anymore. Maybe that's a hidden.
We don't have to have anyone looking at them.
Anyone looking at them, analysing them. Yeah. Do your project managers not go mad? Do they not frustrating? No. No, because they've just got to deliver the work to the milestones, and that's all that really matters, I guess.
Well, their role is making sure that it's a human being role. It's not it's not a spreadsheet role. Yeah. It's those communications making
clients never ask you for timesheets, because I bet some people listening, they probably have clients who say, I want to see the timesheets.
But what are they? I suppose that's also that's a re-education of clients. I think it's very difficult to change if you've got an existing relationship with a client and you've got a certain behaviour that you fulfil and you give them reports, whatever. It's very difficult to say, we're going to stop that now. As of next Friday, you're not going to get it anymore. You can't do that. You have to educate them over a period of time that they're going to that they feel more comfortable. That why they. What satisfaction are they getting from that? Are you selling? A lot of our conversations now is like, are you selling on value? Are you actually? We don't sell on hours. You're looking at how you go about quoting for work, and how you go about the client recognizing what it is that you do, and what that magic that you do bring. It's
the success, the outcomes of the work.
The 1 hour there and 1 hour there.
Great. So now we get to Alan. I have two stories that I always have when I think of freestyle. The first one is there was a pitch came into Blue Halo, and it was a beautifully written proposal, and it was really detailed, and it was really, we read this. It was Warwick University. And Warwickshire University, Warwick is Warwick, and I read it,
College,
and I think it was university, but I read this brief and I was like, wow, the strategy was so well thought of, and we were like, well, this is great. We never get briefs this good, never get RFPs this strong, and then we figured out by basically a bit of Googling, I think, and we checked the words and a few things on whatever, and we found out that you guys had written the brief. You'd been paid for the strategy work, and then we were like, we're not going to pitch for this because this clearly they're going to win it, So we rejected it. We qualified it out, and it turned out that you didn't win it either. And so the big lesson there was, just because another company's written the strategy doesn't mean you can't win it. So that's a really good. And the other second one was, I was doing a talk at AdTech. I think it was AdTech, on engaging sports fans through social, and I was sitting there and I was really unnerved because Alan had walked in, your other half, and sat right in the middle of the room, and I was sort of really unnerved that I was doing this talk to all these sports people, and one of my competitors was sitting right opposite me, listening to everything I was saying. Like, I couldn't bullshit anything, not that I would have done anyway, but it was like I had to tell, it was almost like up my game a little bit. So it was quite funny, really. So there are my two freestyle stories. So Alan, so how do you work together? It's funny because often I find one person does finances and one person maybe does more the front person of the business, and often that's sometimes quite stressful because person who does the finances is stressing a lot, and the other person's trying to maybe do the more selling, and normally there's a conflict there. You did do the finances. You don't now though, but
I'm still responsible for
yeah.
them.
So does that add pressure? Do you think, or not?
I think Alan is responsible for bringing in new business.
Yeah,
that's what his prime role is, and my role is to make sure that every single touch point that a client has with Freestyle after he's introduced us is better than having Alan in the room.
I love that. It's great.
So he's
and that's got to be quite easy, really. No, sorry, Alan.
Sorry. So he's you want your best salesperson to be moving on to the next, to the next, and I know he's a someone who loves understanding about clients, loves understanding. He gets a real buzz about understanding a new business and those relationships, and he loves sort of winning new work. But he gets quite distracted very easily once it becomes normal. So I need him to be away from a client as quickly as possible once that process starts, because you don't want him getting bored, because the client's not going to benefit from that. But also, he's going to dip back in from time to time. So I suppose my role as MD, CEO, whatever it is whatever that title is the whole team.
You don't have titles, don't worry.
God knows what it is. So it's the whole team. It's making sure everything runs smoothly after that. Where I think the only mixture of
come on, dish the dirt.
Well, as a partner, you want to support someone in the role that they do, and you want to, and I know that I could never do a sales role because I take it far too personally when someone rejects something.
Yeah, it's a tough job.
I couldn't do it. And you sort of as a partner of somebody, you understand. You can see when they're having a tough time, and they might be having a tough time at home. And I suppose my job as a wife and as the MD sometimes is at odds with each other, because I need him to be in top form, so I need him to not be worrying about things. I need him to feel confident and
because the salespeople, but that's the point I was trying to make, is that it's hard because the other person's often doing the selling, or is the front person, therefore has to have this kind of sometimes willful blindness, a bit optimism, very optimistic person,
the confidence and
and then if sometimes the business is struggling financially at all, which it always will do at some point, right? That's just normal life. It's trying to, and if you've got two of you, one of you's feeling a bit low and the other one's, you must be like, you feel like constantly picking each other up. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe but you obviously do it really well.
Or
I mean,
it's not being fully honest with each other about how you're feeling. Yeah, it's fine. So,
but it works, right? So it has worked.
It
can work. And I think you've proved that very well.
But then maybe we're a bit weird because our sport is together.
Yeah.
So when we do things in an evening, it tends to be in the same pool. At a weekend, we're swimming in the same garden.
Do you ever get some time to yourself? I'm coming here for the podcast. That's it. So just to finish on, I mean, is there any? I spoke recently to a group of business people, and I said sometimes it's, and I brought this up, and I was just curious to ask guests on this show. Are there any like mantras or anything that you live, like little phrases that you live by if things get bad, or if, I don't know, is there anything that you have? Like, I always have this saying, I always say, you've got to have the bad days to appreciate the good days. Is there anything? Have you got because you do, and I mean, and sometimes there's another one I sometimes use, which is normally one step beyond the point of failure, which I stole from Napoleon Hill, by the way, for the Think and Grow Rich, which is something big's gonna. So I always convince myself that when things are going wrong, something really good's about to happen. I don't know if that's true or not, but you know what? Normally I find something good and I justify it that way. But I don't know, is there any like things that when things are tough for you that you, any sayings or anything, mantras, really. Or just get on with it?
I read a lot of books.
Yeah.
And I think come back to the Agencynomics book, you talked about how your editor told you got too many things in there.
Yeah.
And I think there's an awful lot of books out there that've got one message, and then they sort of give you the message, and then they spend the next 100 pages showing you different examples of how that message is, and it's almost like they're saving up to write the next book, which will be about the next message.
Yes.
And I think that's quite frustrating, because it's like, if you're reasonably intelligent, you go, I got the message in the first chapter.
Is that why I only ever half read books? Because I get bored. I've got the freaking point now.
Whereas Agencynomics is like,
Yeah.
you're changing subjects so frequently. It's like, oh, right, next.
Yeah.
It's all.
I mean, people still complain that there's not enough detail. No, on the whole, it's been very positive. Yeah.
I suppose the only thing, and the thing with books for me is that there are an awful lot of, you read more and more, and the more I read, the more I go, I sort of knew that. It's just reaffirming something I hadn't realised I already knew or was already doing. My only real thing is no regrets.
Okay,
So,
no regret.
I'm not very.
That's good.
I'm a bit reticent about making decisions. I'm a bit of a. There's so many different options out there, so many different things you could be doing. How on earth do you decide which the best one is? And sometimes just go for it and don't regret it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really, really, really good advice for anyone just to let go of. Things. Sometimes you hold on to things in the past. You can't really regret things that happen. You can only really be in the now and move forward, right? So that's great. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed talking to you.
It's been great. I was very nervous beforehand, but actually it's been quite easy.
Well, you've been great. I'm probably more nervous than you are secretly, but anyway. So thanks everyone. I hope everyone enjoyed the episode. We'll be back for another episode 2. A million thanks to my guest Suzanne Linton, and that's a wrap from us. Thank you.